You know you've got some friends in the audience, places you used to work at. When you get claps like that, that's great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alan Treikoff. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Emergent, which is the administrative coordinator of the LEAF Coalition, which is the world's largest civil society, public-private coalition that's focused on stopping tropical deforestation. So it's nice to see some friendly faces. So before we get started on stopping tropical deforestation, I kind of wanted to ground the conversation in some numbers. So all of us are in travel. We know that the New York London flight is probably one of the more traveled flights. There's actually 60 flights going in either direction every single day. And each one of those planes carries about 300 people on it. And those 300 people emit about a metric ton on that journey. You guys can do the math. That's about 18,000 metric tons on one city pair each and every day. And that's roughly the equivalent of about 1,100 American family households emit in an entire year. So it's big, just one route. What if we wanted to offset just that one route? How many trees would we have to not cut down? That's the question I want us to explore. The question is, how many acres of tropical forest trees would we have to stop from being cut down? And the answer is 76 acres, roughly about 76 acres. How much is 76 acres? It's about the size of this convention center. Imagine that everything around this convention center was just dense, moist, tropical forest trees. It would be about the entire emissions of just this one city pair for one day. The San Diego Convention Center is about 60 acres, so we might have to annex the harbor there, but you get a sense of what we're talking about. That's about 17,000 trees. So you'd have to stop 17,000 trees from being cut down every day just for this one city pair. You could say that's actually smaller than I thought. You might say, actually, that's a lot bigger than I thought. If you're in the latter camp, I hate to tell you, but actually we lose a lot more than that every day. We lose about the size of San Diego every single day in terms of moist tropical forest trees. It's about 75,000 acres. That's about 1,200 of these convention centers every single day. And that's about 17 million tropical trees every single day, 365 days a year. It's a massive problem. And it's a problem that we cannot ignore. Some want to plant trees. And planting trees is going to be really, really important, especially as companies get closer to reaching their net zero target in the 2035, 2040 region. For right now, you cannot plant a tree out of this problem. You cannot. Unfortunately, our biomes and transpiration, essentially what drives rainfall, it's already changing. To the extent that the Amazon is not able to regenerate further because they've taken out too much of it. So if we ignore this problem, the trees you plant today are going to die anyways. So you kind of have to look after the trees that are still living before we can focus so intensely on planting trees. I hope I've inspired you, maybe put a little bit of fear into you. Yeah, the problem is really big, but it's also solvable. So if there's one thing I want you to walk away from this conversation is that this can actually be treated, but it's going to require a number of things. First, we have to operate at a scale much larger than what we've been accustomed to doing in the project-based worlds. Projects are great. Carbon projects are great, but they're too small. There's not enough of them. And there aren't enough high-integrity projects to actually make a difference. The second thing is we'll have to act quickly. We only have about 8 years to stop tropical deforestation. We have to go from 6 billion tons per year down to 1 billion tons in 8 years. That's going to require a lot of collaboration. And lastly, we have to use systemic change tools to be able to make a difference. And what I mean by that is There's a bunch of tools in the toolbox that can make this happen. We have to activate them. Things like new policy creation, policy enforcement, education, incentives. That means all the companies here at this convention, or a lot of them, need to act beyond their value chain. In the LEAF Coalition, we actually can't do business with any company that is not focused on its own internal value chain emissions. You have to have a science-based target, you have to have a net zero target, you have to be part of the UN Race to Zero. But we plead that companies go beyond their value chain to get involved in helping to solve tropical deforestation. Essentially, our business landscape will change so much by 2030 if we ignore this. You think it gets too hot now to land and take off at runways? Imagine what it's going to look like in about 8 more years when we inch up another 0.2 degrees in Celsius, right? It's not optional. How do we do this then? How do we come together to solve for this? There's a new approach called the Jurisdictional REDD+ approach to crediting, very similar to the project-based approach, but instead of just focusing on small projects, maybe 10,000 hectares, 20,000 hectares, you're focusing on entire jurisdictions. That's just a fancy word for a state level or a national level. Everything within a set of borders, everything which you can work with governments in, right? So it's much, much larger scale. And the founders of the LEAF Coalition are creating the world's first marketplace for these types of credits. It's still a REDD+ credit, but it's just at a much, much greater scale, and it's at a much higher integrity, and I'll get onto that in a moment. The jurisdictional approach essentially means working with the businesses, the communities, the governments, the indigenous peoples within a set of borders in order to enact policies and to create incentives so that you help them transform their economies away from cutting down trees and instead valuing those trees and transforming their economies towards something like ecotourism, like Costa Rica has all done. I'm sure we've all been to Costa Rica, or we know something about Costa Rica. That is the absolute success story in terms of how to generate an entire new subsection of their economy. Art Trees is the name of the standard that allows for the private sector to get involved. Right? This is voluntary carbon market credits. You're probably familiar with the gold standard, the Verra VCS standard. Art Trees is the new jurisdictional REDD+ standard. It was created by another nonprofit like Emergent, who I work for, called Windrock International. They run the American Carbon Registry. They have fellows from the World Resources Institute on their board. This is legit. It was already approved by Corsia, by ICROA. Airlines in the room, we absolutely encourage you to consider Art Trees credits as part of your program, and of course travel buyers as well. One of the things that our founders and participants appreciate the most about Art Trees is how it overcomes many of the project-based challenges, especially with double counting or leakage, right? I stop something in this part of the neighborhood, but it just goes down to another part of the neighborhood. The jurisdictional REDD+ approach is very robust. It is able to overcome many of those challenges. So now we get on to the LEAF Coalition. The LEAF Coalition is the world's largest public-private civil society coalition that's focused on leveraging this new standard and enabling, over 30 countries around the world to take part in generating credits. They need finance. Tropical forest countries need finance in order to enact the changes to create long-term sustainable economic transformation. And so the companies that you see up here on the board are some of the original founders, the original participants in the LEAF Coalition. We do have airlines in the coalition. Yay! Thanks, Amelia. We have yet to have hotels and rental car companies, but these private sector entities work together with the United States government, UK government, and Norwegian governments, who together have now pulled together $1.5 billion in forward purchase commitments over the coming 5 years. So we essentially use results-based payments. We tell tropical forest countries, thank you for your proposal. It was clear, we've selected your proposal, and now go forth and deliver. And when you deliver on these emissions reductions within your state or nation, you will be compensated from the 1.5 billion that I've just mentioned. It's all coordinated by Emergent. Emergent is a nonprofit set up by the Environmental Defense Fund. We do not charge a margin on our credits. We charge a very small transaction fee. That's because the money is actually needed where the deforestation is happening. So that's why we exist, is to help it stop permanently. So what's next? I'd say, given that I only have 15 minutes and I'm about up, if you're a buyer, make your sustainability department aware that Art Trees is a new standard and that a private sector actor that meets our criteria can get involved. You can ask your travel suppliers, hey, how come you're not in the LEAF Coalition? Maybe, especially if you're an airline, these are CORSIA relevant credits. If you're in sustainability and you have influence over your portfolio, compensate with Jurisdictional Red Plus. Bring in J-Red, don't just focus on Project Red Plus. And then lastly, if you're an airline, these are CORSIA relevant credits, so absolutely consider how to apply them against your CORSIA relevant targets. And you've got members of Amazon and Emergent here. Please reach out to any one of us if you have questions about the LEAF Coalition or about Art Trees. And that was my 15 minutes of fame at GBTA. Woohoo! Say again? Oh, do I have time for questions? Do I have any questions from the audience? Kelsey, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I know that an issue that has come to light recently around tree planting, particularly in California, is when done improperly, it can fuel forest fire. How does your approach take that into account?
So, Art Trees and the LEAF Coalition is first and foremost focused on stopping tropical deforestation before planting. In fact, a country cannot generate Art Trees credits if it hasn't first demonstrated that it can stop the hemorrhage from tropical deforestation. So we do allow for removals credits, tree planting credits in the future once they've met a certain threshold. I think whether it's California or a tropical forest country, once you've qualified and you can generate credits from removals, I think it comes down to forestry management. So we are focused on what's called capacity building, giving those governments the capability of proper forest management through surveillance, and other measures to compensate for that. But yeah, emissions reductions is really the name of the game in the LEAF Coalition so first stop. Thanks, though, for the question. Any other questions?
Thanks, Alan. Great insights. Can you share with the group what the minimum sort of buy is if to be part of the LEAF Coalition? Obviously, you've got buyers and suppliers that are, in need of varying amounts of credits for the long-term future. So, can you speak to that?
Yeah. At this moment in time, well, first of all, the LEAF Coalition is a high ambition coalition. To solve tropical deforestation, we need about $25 billion a year for the next 10 years to permanently stop tropical deforestation. Now, LEAF is very proud. We're all very proud with what we've been able to muster in just 1 year's time, but it's clearly not enough. And so, to answer your question, it is 1 million tons over a 5-year period. That's our minimum amount that we're hoping to secure. These are for forward agreements from 2022 to 2026 vintages. So essentially, these vintages become available in 2024 and run through the beginning of 2028. I'm very happy to talk to companies about other levels of interest. But at the moment, all the companies you see on the screen were ones that were prepared to come in, some well beyond their current footprints, I might add, right? Some companies actually just believe in if they have nature goals, they have other CSR type goals. So it was they acted beyond what their typical footprint was. But thanks for the question. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you, everyone.